Now, a swarm of bees halted play at the Indian Wells tennis tournament in California last night. Play was suspended during the quarter-final between Carlos Alcaraz and Alexander Zverev. The world number 2, Alcaraz, was stung on the side of his forehead, with play halted for almost 2 hours. Once the players finally left the court, a beekeeper arrived to resolve the problem. A man called Lance Davis used a vacuum to suck the bees into a cage so they could later be released.
Yeah, it was strange. I've never seen something like that in a tennis tournament, a tennis match. Well, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit afraid of the bees. So I was not 100% sure about the start again. But yeah, once the match started again, I had to stay away from the bees and really focus on the match.
Well, let's chat about this now to bee removal expert Peter Higgs. Peter, good to see you. Thanks for joining us to discuss this. I mean, it's a bit alarming for those of us who don't deal with bees all day, every day. But how unusual is this as far as you're concerned?
It's a daily occurrence for us, especially as we hit sort of spring season and summer. So it can happen a lot. And what we've seen here is actually a swarm. And that's when the bees actually leave a colony, either from a feral hive, which is in a building maybe, or beekeeping hives, which I've got behind me. And they leave that when there's not enough room or for other reasons, and they swarm off. They're pretty harmless when they do that. And actually, when people get stung, it's normally when they start panicking and squashing the bees into themselves, trying to get away from them, as we could see from the footage here.
I mean, it is easy to panic when you see a swarm of bees coming at you. And we saw Carlos Alcaraz got stung on his head there. Before we move on to the reactions, I mean, why would the bees have gone there in particular? What's your hunch?
So they were probably just resting there. We've had them in all sorts of funny places. Bees will look to build honeycomb, which is what this stuff is. They build honeycomb in any void space. We've had them build honeycomb in sort of crates, metal containers, plastic containers. There might have been a void space somewhere in that equipment, or they were simply just resting whilst they were on their way to a new home that the scout bees had located. And there will be, out of all of those bees, just one singular queen amongst them all.
Yes, we thought the Queen might have something to do with it. Now, listen, how would you have gone about getting rid of them? Because people have focused on this guy, Lance Davis, who turned up with an uncanny resemblance to Meatloaf, no gloves on, carrying what looked like a Hoover, and he just sorted out the problem. Is that the way you do it? Like no protection?
So that's a specialist type of vacuum. It's called a bee vac, and it's a vacuum is used to create the suction, but it's actually a nuke box, essentially a beehive. The bees don't get harmed. They go down this smooth pipe into the container. It seems like a good way to remove it off the camera equipment like that. If they're on a bush or something like that, beekeepers will often use a skep, which is what this is. You put that underneath where the swarm of bees are, you bang the bees off into the skep, and then you'll use a sheet to put over the skep, and then you can take them away that way. So there's various methods of doing it. In this case, it was lucky that they were actually able to bring that equipment, what looked to be able to bring that equipment down to ground level. One of the challenges initially that would have been a problem is actually the bees were so high up on that camera equipment, no one could easily remove that unless it was brought back down.
Pete, you got all the props today, and we really appreciate you showing us how you do it. Look, bee stings can be dangerous. People can have anaphylactic shock if they're stung, of course. It begs the question, how much do you get stung in your line of business?
So we've got all the right PPE, and it is something you should always do. If you've got bees, don't try and, it's not about going and getting a vacuum. That'll actually kill the bees. The worst thing you can do is actually try and harm the bees, because if they think they're being attacked, they're more likely to react. So it's best just to stay calm and to get a professional in. Obviously, we're a Bee Gone here. We remove bees alive. There's plenty of other companies now in the UK. You can go to associations like BeeBra, British Bee Removers Association, to find someone to actually come and remove bees if they're in a building, or if there's a swarm. The British Beekeepers Association has lots of useful information on there as well as to removing a swarm, which is what we saw here.
Yeah, Peter, look, final question. We've been discussing over the past few years the problems of the bee population. You see them all the time, especially this time of the year as it warms up. What is the situation with our bee population? Because bees are meant to be our friends.
They are, yes. They're very, very important. They're actually responsible for pollinating about 1/3 of our crops. So they're absolutely, completely vital. We need to do everything we can to help and support bees. killing bees, for an example, absolutely does not help bees in any way. So they should always look to be saved by a beekeeper or a live bee removal specialist like ourselves, especially when they colonise buildings. There's more and more swarms around, and one of the reasons for that is actually the bees are being kept by more beekeepers. And if you do want to keep bees, it's highly recommended that you go on a course to learn how to keep them.
Peter, really appreciate you sharing your expertise. Wish we had some of that honeycomb with us here in the studio, but for now, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.